Welcome back. Part two of immigrating to Peru. Again, our particular experience is immigrating from the United States to Peru. So we'll go into some detail here. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and we're
Yeah.
happy to talk about it.
And the previous video were just some general guidelines and options for
Yep.
immigrating, and I'll link that video down below as well.
Yep.
So we'll just get right into it. It's going to be long.
Yep.
So Clint and my processes were different, so I'm going to let Clint speak first,
Yep.
and then we'll just go on.
So we applied for, or I applied originally for a permanent worker visa, which is essentially permanent residency. And so we're working under that category when we're talking about this process. So how that began was getting a business visa. And the reason why we did this is to have as much time as possible to complete the immigration process once we got into Peru. And so this can be done at a Peruvian embassy or a consulate near you in your country. And there's a few requirements that we want to get into really quickly. One is a letter from the entity that you'll be working with in Peru during your stay. The other is a letter from a sponsor of either a business connection in the country or what have you.
And I would just like to say, we had some very nice friends.
Amazing.
That helped us with this, because you do need these letters from a Peruvian.
Yep.
And so thank you to those of you who helped. I honestly couldn't have done it without you. So.
Honestly. So the cost of the business visa is about $30 or 107.50 soles. And it requires a valid passport for 6 months after your visa expires, but we recommend having it at least a year after the visa would expire, or at least having another additional year on your passport at least.
Yeah.
Also, 2 additional passport photos and a round-trip plane ticket. They want to see that you are going into the country and leaving as well. So again, we did some, there's a need for some apostilling, and so we talked about that in the last video, but it's worth mentioning again because it's important.
Yeah.
This is a special type of certification or legalization of documents that's governed by international agreements through the United Nations. So it's important to get the document apostilled where it was produced. So for us, for example, our marriage certificate was produced in the state of Wisconsin, so that it has to be apostilled in the state of Wisconsin. It cannot be apostilled in the country that you're immigrating to.
Or even in another state.
Or even in another state. It has to be apostilled where it was produced. So that's just for getting the business visa to enter the country for 6 months, which is what I got. This also is able to be renewed and extended, which I had to do because of delays. But the original kind of permission you get is for 6 months.
And we mentioned this in the previous video, but I'll mention again, be prepared for delays.
Absolutely. 100%. So I was originally told that this process would take 4 months. So we'll get into how long it actually took at the end here.
Yeah.
So then comes the actual permanent residency process and the visa residency process. So in order to do that, I was working under a permanent worker kind of track. So in order to have that worker visa activated, there needs to be an entity in Peru to hire you. So it's possible that there's a company or a business that has operations in Peru that you're going to be working for. Honestly, that will be the easier route.
Yeah.
If there's an already established entity in Peru that is going to employ you for X amount of time, years, whatever, then getting the agreements through them is the way to go. For me, I did not have that. I wanted to actually kind of blaze my own trail, as it were. And so in order to do that, we had to form a new entity in Peru. Now, this can take the form of a for-profit small business or a nonprofit organization. There's a couple things to talk about there. This requires a Peruvian national or a Peruvian a resident of Peru in order to establish this entity, which requires then a sponsor. We had one sponsor, again, another friend of ours, who has done an enormous favor for us,
Yeah.
and we hope
She's
to.
amazing.
It's a huge favor. It's a lot of time for that sponsor, and so it's not a light thing to ask. But there's a little bit of a caveat there. For a for-profit entity, you only need one sponsor. There's only one person required, that acts as the interim general manager to open that entity and have it operating in Peru. For a nonprofit organization or entity, you need 3. Basically, you're creating a board of directors. So again, for-profit, you only need 1 sponsor. For a nonprofit, you need 3. So once that entity is open, established, and operating, then the next stage can kind of happen. And that's basically justifying your position, your role of working in the country. Now, this requires often a post-secondary education, which is, again, where the apostille documents came in. So my university degree, we had that apostilled, and we brought that down with copies to prove that I am qualified to fulfill that position. Next was kind of a recommendation or establishing that I had experience working in this field, that it's not just arbitrary that I'm going to be working in such and such field. And so this came in the form of a letter from a letter of recommendation from a previous supervisor, having worked in that field. And that was legalized and goes through all the normal processes of getting signatures and things like that certified for use in official documents in Peru. The next stage is actually forming a work contract for me with this new entity. That took the form of a 3-year working work contract, and this basically was used as justification to say, okay, permanent residency is what we need because you're going to be working here for 3 years, and so that was kind of the necessary document to say, okay, this is the length of time we're going to be here. This justifies permanent residency. Behind all of that is background checks. And so Interpol, which is also in Lima, is required for ensuring that you are not an international criminal. Additionally to that, U.S. and Canadian citizens also need an FBI background check, which is something that needs to be sent to the United States, processed, and then returned to Peru or whatever other country you're immigrating to. This is also done at your Interpol appointment.
Yeah.
The cost for this whole the Interpol process is 80 soles, or about $24.50, and this is paid at the Banco Nacional, which is in Lima and near Interpol.
And you need to have your receipt of payment when you go to your Interpol appointment.
Right. And then the FBI appointment or check is an additional $30, and that can be done at BCP, which is also around the Interpol area, and there are specific branches that handle those specific payments.
Yes.
Again, you have to have those payments in receipt form when you go into your appointment. Before your appointment, you need to have those things paid.
Yes.
Obviously, you'll need a valid passport and some additional passport photos. I believe I needed 2.
Yep.
And be sure that all of your documents, especially for the FBI background check, are completely filled out. The Interpol employees or guys who are processing the staff there are not necessarily accustomed to the FBI background check. They don't get as many U.S. and Canadian citizens coming through this process. So be extra vigilant about those documents being filled out fully. The FBI will return them if they're not complete.
Yeah.
And that will, again, add more delays. Your Interpol background check will be valid for 6 months.
Yeah.
Another important consideration for delays.
Yeah.
So if your process lasts longer than 6 months, they may require you to redo your Interpol
and FBI background
check, which I had to do twice. So just another comment about payments to Banco Nacional. These payments are required for various stages of the process. There's more than one of them. You must have the receipts upon visiting Interpol or upon visiting Migraciones, because they will also require you to have payments up front before your appointment happens at Migraciones.
And you cannot make the payment at Migraciones.
Correct.
You have to go to Banco Nacional.
Very important. Mm-hmm. In our experience, these payments did not exceed $50 each individually. Combined, they were very much likely more than $50, but it's important to note that if you're having to go in and making this absurdly huge payment, that should raise a red flag for you.
Yeah.
And there are various conduits for dealing with corruption and other things, but just be aware, none of the individual payments should be greater than $50.
Yeah.
When all this process is done and you have a smile on your face, and you're going to pick up your documents...
Hopefully a smile on your
Hopefully
face.
a smile. I didn't really have a smile, but anyway. The documents must be picked up in person. You cannot have your lawyer or somebody else give powers to go pick them up, and there's a couple reasons for that.
Yeah.
One is that you must have your passport, and the reason you must have your passport is because they're going to stamp in your passport a change of migration status that basically invalidates a tourist visa or a business visa, and gives basically power to another document, which is your carnet de extranjería. So they're going to stamp that, and they're going to give you a physical card with your face on it, new information, your
And
fingerprint.
Make sure all the information's correct.
Make sure the information's correct.
Before you leave.
Absolutely, very important. So,
And then once you get that card in your hand,
yes,
it's party time.
it's party time. You can finally relax. Just as a context for how long this process takes, again, I was told 4 months. I began this process on May 4th of 2017, and it was finalized on March 23rd of 2018. So that's about 11 months. There were many delays. It was very frustrating. It was very stressful. Again, living in Arequipa, to be perfectly honest, complicated that situation. Had we been living in Lima, it would have been much more straightforward, I think.
And probably quicker as well.
Probably quicker. So just full disclosure, if you're immigrating and living in Lima, your process is going to be probably easier, more efficient, and faster.
Yeah. So for my process, it was different than Clint's. So I came in to the country on a tourist visa. Mm-hmm. Essentially, I was waiting for Clint's residency process to be done because I was applying for a family residency visa.
Right, which can only take place if a family member has residency established.
So because I was applying under that visa, I needed to prove my relationship to Clint.
Yep.
We're married.
Yep.
So that required an apostilled marriage certificate.
Here we go again.
And again, apostilling must be done in the place the original document was produced. And this is rather important as well because this caused a delay in my process. Even if your marriage certificate, we'll say for our purposes, is done in another language, so English, that English copy is what needs to be apostilled.
Right.
Not
Yes.
a Spanish copy.
Very important.
Yes, they will need a Spanish translation. However, that translation has to be translated in Peru by a certified Peruvian translator.
Very important.
So what we did by mistake was have it translated in the United States and have the translation apostilled,
Right.
which caused some delays. So make sure you don't translate anything beforehand, get the original apostilled in whatever language it is, and then take it to Peru to have it translated.
Again, apostilling in your home country, translation in Peru.
Yes. Because I came in on a tourist visa, my immigration status had to be changed. So that required a payment to Banco Nacional, and that was about 117 soles, which is around $35.50. So that needed to be paid, and I needed to have that receipt again before going to Migraciones and having that completed.
Yep.
So I also needed an Interpol background check.
Which was very, very similar to my process, almost identical.
A little different. They have been changing
Right.
the immigration process. So we'll link all of the links below for different immigration requirements and things from Peru. So check that because this might already be out of date.
Right.
And then since I'm from the United States, that again also required an FBI background check. So the cost for Interpol was 80 soles or $24 to Banco Nacional, and the FBI background check was $30 to BCP.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also needed my valid passport, again, keep that valid for at least a year, and extra passport photos. And again, same thing. Documents must be picked up in person. I could not give my lawyer the power to do that for me because they needed to stamp my passport to show that I have a change in visa status. And then I received my carnet.
Which was second party time.
Yes. So for my process time, I started in March of 2018.
Yep, right after my process was concluded.
So the end of March.
Yep.
And I ended in July. So that was about 4 months for my family visa.
Yep.
So a few notes on the carnet.
Yep.
Once you receive your card, that's great. But it does need to be renewed every 2 years.
Yep.
So apparently this can be done online. We haven't done this yet.
Right.
And supposedly it takes 2 weeks, but again,
Expect delays.
expect delays.
Right. So I would recommend probably 4 to 6 weeks before your card expires to definitely have the process started.
Yeah. And there is a charge. We think it's about 25 soles,
Yep.
which is around $8. So
$8.
that's not too bad.
If you are a permanent resident of Peru, if you leave for more than 6 months, more than 180 days, I think it's 183 days, your card is invalid. However, there is an application on the Migraciones website. Again, we'll probably put a link down there.
Yep.
For an application to kind of protect your carnet if you're leaving the country for more than 6
Yeah.
months.
So you can ask for a special permission.
Right.
We haven't done this again, so
Right.
I'm not sure how that works, but
Right.
there is an application for it.
Yep. So, all in all, with the Carnet de Extranjería, you are pretty much, you have all the powers of a Peruvian, except one thing: you cannot vote.
Yep.
That is the only thing that being naturalized is the next step. So, you can open bank accounts, own a house, sign documents, sign work contracts, all of those things. Anything that a Peruvian can do, open businesses, open organizations, open anything you want. You can do anything that a Peruvian can do except vote. You cannot vote.
Yep. So that was just our experience.
Yeah. Again, if you have any questions specifically about moving, or if there's other moving to Peru or other places, just experience in dealing with the immigration process in another place, we would love to help. If there's anything we can do to help, we're happy to do it. We had very little information going in, and we kind of had to wing it on our own, and we learned a lot. And so we want to help if we can.
And we mentioned this in the last video, but I'll mention it again. We did have an immigration lawyer.
Yes.
And he and she, because we had
Yes.
two, were very helpful. And
It would have been very, extremely difficult without them.
If it took Clint 11 months to
Right.
do it with a lawyer, it just would have been so much longer and so much more frustrating.
We're so grateful to them. They've been amazing.
Yeah. So I think that's it. And
Yeah.
I'll link that previous video below because it has a bit more in-depth information on requirements and such. But now we're permanent residents.
Yeah,
So
nice.
it's great, and we don't have to worry about it for 2 more years.
Nice.
So again, let us know if you have questions. If you've immigrated elsewhere, let us know, or if you have any resources.
Yeah, share your resources below, please.
Yeah.
Please.
But otherwise, I think we'll see you in the next video.